Vinyl Community back for part 2 by request. This time we are doing the 80s. We're doing a 80s dance party. Tim and I have talked this over beforehand, and we both challenged ourselves. So I am restricting myself to only 12-inch singles. And Tim, you want to tell them what you've confined yourself to?
I have confined myself to the 7-inch 45, if you will, the true single format of, portability. So
yeah, you can't. Yeah, 7-inch. It's nice. I do have some, but it's a rabbit hole I just have never gone down. I'm afraid to.
It's expensive, and there's so much soul that I want that's only on 7-inch. It's like,
oh yeah,
just throw my hand skyward and say, all right, I'm at your mercy.
Oh yeah, soul records. Yeah, that it's almost like the perfect medium for soul.
There's so many, walk into a studio, record 2 cuts, get it out there, and they went back into obscurity, never to go back to the studio again. But it's some of the funkiest stuff you'll ever find. And of course I want
it. So Tim, you want to start us off?
I will. So, we talked about the 80s, and, we could have probably pulled 53,000 records when it came to the 80s. I mean, everybody has a true definition of the 80s. And one area for me that really kicks off the 80s, and what's funny is that this record really didn't even come out in the 80s. It actually was released in 1979. But on August 1st of 1981, it became an 80s record. And that's the Buggles' Video Killed the Radio Star. The very first song on MTV, we all know it. This is where the era started. This is really where our lives in the 80s changed, because MTV was introduced, and now we had a visual medium with these 3 to 4 minute songs. And let's face it, in the 80s, we weren't the same. So if I was doing an 80s party, this has to be in there. It's iconic, and I think it's just timeless.
Perfect choice. Perfect way to set things off, because, the 80s were the MTV generation, and just coupling things with video just made it so wonderful. And so beforehand, Tim and I were talking, and the hardest thing for me was it's so easy for me just to drift towards that new wave era of the 80s, the early 80s. I could do a whole set on the early era of the 80s, but I have to kick one off with the early era. I have to go with Soft Cell's Tainted Love. And this, you talked about soul, so Tainted Love is actually a remake of an old soul song, Northern soul song. And I prefer the 12-inch mix of this album because it also mixes Where Did Your Love Go, which was done by the Supremes. So it wasn't original, but this is a song that Soft Cell is really known for. They were kind of at least in the United States, really a one-hit wonder with that one song. And the 12-inch single, I love it when the 12-inch singles or even the 7-inch singles have artwork, dedicated artwork, but the artwork on this one is just terrible. I don't know what they were thinking with this one.
That should have been the cover.
This, with Mark Allman singing, this should have been the cover versus... I don't know what that is.
No, it's really bizarre, and to me, the 12-inch single version is the epitome iconic, because it never feels complete until you hear that Where Did Our Love Go extended into the song. You always feel like you got cheated. So that's just an iconic version. So my next one, also a cover of an old song from the 60s. One type of music that really had a resurgence in the 80s was ska, and it really just kind of allowed, and it was started in the UK, and it was a big movement, and it embraced everything that was ska and punk, and it just kind of put it all together. And here are these guys that are just playing all kinds of loud music. And when I think ska from the 80s, there's two groups, I think, the Specials and Madness. And this is one step beyond. And it has such a screaming horn. It's, to me, one of those iconic, just, dancers that can get people moving. It's such a great song. And I think it was an early to mid 60s song, and I can't remember the artist. We'll have to look it up. But it had the same feel, but they added that ska punk element to it. Try to reduce the glare here. So Madness is one step beyond. I know they had bigger hits with Our House and It Must Be Love, but honestly, to me, this is where you go with Madness. Absolutely fantastic, iconic song, and it's just a scorcher.
That's an excellent pick, because I didn't even think to go the ska route. And yeah, if you're thinking 80s, early 80s ska, yeah, Madness is the place to go.
Yeah.
So nothing super impressive with this one, and I don't know how well it's going to come out on the camera. I don't know if you can read that, but this is a promo of The Fix. One thing leads to another. So this, again, is an extended 8-inch single. I think the original was probably a little over 3 minutes, because a lot of the 80s songs, it was about 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes tops, and that was good. But again, I'm going for the extended 12-inch where I can. And this one had its own cover, but I got a promo copy, so it didn't have the cover on it. But it starts out a little bit different, but it repeats the elements, the stems of the song. And so, what I like about some of these singles is, if I were DJing now, it gives you a piece of nostalgia. People they recognize the song, but it's different. And
right.
So it draws them in, and they're like, what is this? What is this playing? And so this one I wouldn't play too long, but it does give you time to think about, hey, what song am I going to mix into this? And, the Fix were another band. They were much bigger in the UK. But here, this is really the song that they're known for. And I want to say that Rupert Hine produced this. And so Rupert Hine also did the soundtrack for Better Off Dead, if you know that movie. So,
oh yeah,
80s movie, but he was also a well-known producer.
Right. Yeah, you know what? It's funny too, because you tend to forget just how many things Rupert Hine produced. But for me, The Fix, like you said, one thing leads to another. But I think of also Red Skies, and there's a couple other hits. Yeah. And if I hadn't limited myself to a 7-inch, I would have pulled that, because I have like 3 or 4 of their albums. I'm actually a fan. So it's a great cut. I'm going to stick with the early 80s for just one more. And because I think this one's so iconic. And in the 80s, we didn't have all the things that we have today. We didn't have the cell phone. We didn't have caller ID. We didn't have, whatever function to call someone back and say, who was just called me. And if you lived in the 80s, you probably heard this song and called it. And that's Jenny, 867-5309. Such an iconic song. And it's one of those ones that, honestly, I think that if anybody hears it, they can really sing along, because it's simple. It's, it's got all the tropes of an 80s song, girl trouble, it's written on the bathroom wall. We've all been there, right? But it's so iconic, and it's just so much fun. And it's one of those ones that, everyone knows it so well. You can drop volume and people can sing the number like there's no tomorrow. And I'd be willing to bet that if a lot of our viewers said they didn't try to call that number at least once and ask for Jenny, I might call shenanigans. So,
I wonder if that phone number's been blocked.
I think, I remember reading something that I think that number has been like taken out of cycling for at least for a while. It may be back in now, but I mean, then again, you got some 50-year-old guy like me who going, I wonder if it still works.
Yeah, no, that's a classic. When I was DJing, I don't think I ever used that one, but that would be a good record because like everybody knows the lyrics so well, and at least the phone number, so you jump in. And you just, yeah,
exactly. And it's one that, like you said, it's just because it catches that spirit, that essence so well. So,
all right. So my next one is Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Relax. And this is another one where, I like the extended mix because it plays on the elements that are so good. This one is particularly interesting because, Trevor Horn from Yes produced it. And so it has that wonderful Yes production to it. But yeah, a classic song. It had a video that was rather risque that, I remember watching on MTV and I was like, what's this all about when I was an adolescent? So fairly strange, but a classic song.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I flashed it as well in case it wasn't seen. But you want to talk about 80s icon. I mean, there were grandmothers wearing T-shirts that said, Frankie says relax, and boy, did that song change. But
yeah,
it was still, you couldn't go anywhere without a Frankie Goes to Hollywood reference when that song came out.
Yep.
And you know what? And this one's kind of still in the mid 80s, so I'll kind of use that as a segue. You can't talk 80s. Again, you talked about how videos push the boundaries. There was also that sense of androgyny where lines started to blur. I mean, Prince was obviously known for that, but Peter Burns from Dead or Alive, this is You Spin Me Around Like a Record. I mean, just another killer cut, absolutely fantastic. And he really pushed that level of androgyny to the forefront. And probably even maybe earlier on more so than Prince. And what a smash hit. I mean, it's one of those ones that I like the single one because it just comes in out of nowhere, but it's so iconic and the tones are so strong. If you're not on the floor already, you're coming, and it screams 80s. I think it's been on every 80s comp I've ever seen because it is so good.
Yep, I used to play that one quite often, and yeah, it was upbeat, up tempo, and those are the songs that you want to go for. My next one was a staple for me because of the video, because people would do the dance moves, and it was so iconic. And that is the Bangles, Walk Like an Egyptian. And I like the extended mix on this because it starts out with the whistling, and then it just slowly builds and builds and builds off the stems of the song until it gets into the original mix.
Nice.
So, yeah, this is one that I wish I would have had when I was DJing. But yeah, when I was DJing with CDs, almost every show I had this song playing at least once because everybody knew it, everyone loved it, and then people would just try and do the Egyptian moves on the dance floor.
And I just remember, how big that song, like, you couldn't escape it. Like you said, the video was there, but it really, and if you haven't seen the video, do yourself a favor and go watch it, because that video really captured the feel of the song. I mean, there were guys in construction sites with all their gear on trying to do the Egyptian thing because that song was just so infectious. It was everywhere. It's such a great hit. And that's actually what I need to pick up on 12-inch. I'd love to hear that remix because I think.
So out of all the 12-inch records that, I'm going to show today, if there's one to grab because of a particular mix, I would grab that one because I think it's just beautiful the way the extended mix builds into the original song.
I'm going to jump to the later part of the decade. Talked new wave and MTV, but obviously hip hop got a start in the 80s. At least came to the forefront. It came to where the masses started to become aware of hip hop, and it was becoming a commercial success. And I think there were certain songs that really had a crossover appeal, but to me, this was one of those ones that was still authentic enough in the hip hop lane because it had samples that were from recognizable sources that we all kind of recognized, but it still wasn't like it was just a pop song. And that is Tone Loc's Wild.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it sampled Kiss. It sampled I think it had Van Halen in there as well. So, but I mean, Tone Loc had such a delivery about his voice. It was very unique and very iconic.
Oh, yeah, and Delicious Vinyl, anything that was put out on that label, I was trying to grab. And in fact, that's one that I've been trying to look. I actually was trying to get the 12-inch single of that one, but I just haven't found it yet.
I don't recall the mixes on it because I'll be honest, I either had the 45 or I had the album. So I don't recall the mixes of that. But to your point, Delicious Vinyl, I mean, anything that came out on there, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the Brand New Heavies come out on Delicious Vinyl?
Yeah, I think they did.
Which is just a fantastic group. Obviously, Young MC, who actually wrote the lyrics to this song, and Funky Cold Medina. But he was an artist on that label as well. And it seemed like in that late 80s, Delicious Vinyl was just offline.
Yeah, and I mean, the Tone Loc, I have that album. And I mean, you got Funky Cold Medina on there as well. And it's just a perfect record.
Yeah. Yeah, both like I said, and his voice was just so iconic. And that's what I like about, the hip hop is that they're not afraid for the cultural references. So, he makes references to Alex from Stroh's and stuff like that. And that just really is a great callback to the 80s. Yep. Spuds MacKenzie and stuff like that. So it just allows some of those things that might have been forgotten about to be remembered.
Yep. All right, so my next one is likely another one-hit wonder from Portland, Oregon. And the funny thing about them is they did not get big until the song I'm going to show got remixed in Europe, came back to the United States, and then they got signed by Atlantic Records, and that is New Shoes, I Can't Wait. Yeah, I don't know why. I just love that song. And the mix that everybody knows is the Dutch mix. You hear the American mix, it's a little bit different. It's not what was playing on the radio. It was the Dutch mix. And it wasn't until they got signed by Atlantic, and Atlantic just put out the Dutch mix, and that's what everybody knows so well. So, yeah, this is a one that I had to pick up early because I just liked the song. Now, the band... I think they did one more album on Atlantic and it didn't go anywhere. And then, they just cut them.
Yeah. I think they had a second hit. Was it Point of No Return?
Yeah. Yeah.
But clearly nowhere near the success of I Can't Wait. It's funny. I was watching, and this is a completely, 2020, 2021 thing, the versus battles that have been happening with, producers or MCs or things like that, where they kind of pull together 20 of their songs. There was one between Method Man and Redman recently, and they had a DJ just bring it in stuff. And he actually played New Shoes, I Can't Wait. And to watch Redman kind of doing his little thing, singing, I Can't Wait. I didn't even care what they did at that point. I was like, my night's made, because like you said, it was everywhere. That remix was so iconic and popular. Everyone heard it. And when you heard that, when you heard it come on, you instantly recognized it. It was so good. So my next one is actually something I would consider a double A single. It is a reissue. So I'm not going to say it's a cheat, but to me, this was one of the biggest bands of the 80s for consistent, just incredible tunes. And it was such a tragic loss that we don't have them anymore. But I'm talking about Michael Hutchence and NXS.
Wow.
This is Need You Tonight. So this was the reissue that was done a couple years ago. They did records and gift card, like in greeting cards for Valentine's Day. This was Need You Tonight, and then the flip side is Never Tear Us Apart. So you want to talk about two great songs.
Oh man, I had that on cassette when it came out, and for me, that's a perfect album. Sadly, I think I have 3 copies of that record.
I have to talk to you offline of which one I need to buy because I still need to get a reissue of it. But NXS were everywhere. I mean, you want to talk about that? Listen Like Thieves, the One Thing. They just were a hit machine, and they were completely infectious. And by the time Kick came out, forget it. That was everywhere. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that album had like 6 or 7 singles off of it. And
it was one of those ones that if you were just having a house party and you just wanted to put on some music, you could put on that album and it would just, you'd play the whole thing.
Yep, exactly. All right. So I'm going to hit the end of the 80s now, which was a little bit harder for me because of my tendency to go to the earlier part of the decade, but I have to go with Technotronic's Pump the Jam, the Belgian band. And I think, you're pretty knowledgeable, but, to me, this was their only hit song. I think in Europe, they may have done 1 or 2 more, but here in the United States, I mean, everybody knows the song. I remember watching the video on MTV all of the time. And even into the 90s when I was DJing, this is one that I would spin quite often. But this has like 3 or 4 different cuts of this particular song. And so, for me, if you're going to go with Technotronic, I think you could survive with this single.
You're absolutely right. I actually had that 12-inch when I was spinning, and the remixes on there are so great. And what I like about it is that it catches the hook. It's almost throughout the remix. They don't leave you trying to wonder what song it is. They just kind of like make you realize this is an extended version, which sometimes it's nice when you have that because you need that 5, 6, 7 minute break as a DJ to kind of plan your next maybe 5 or 10 or, get a drink or whatever the case may be. But it's not one that left them wondering what the heck is going on. It was a fantastic remix, and I absolutely have that 12-inch. I'm going to have to get that one back. They had a minor hit with a song called Move This.
You're right. Yep.
But
we forgot about that. Yeah.
You want to talk about anywhere close? Not even.
Yeah.
They could have put out 100 songs, and they really just would not have been as big without Pump Up the Jam. And it's such a great one because it allowed pop to kind of follow that house movement that was beginning. And, you had a lot of things in the 90s that use that house beat, and it'll really kind of pave the way for that on commercial radio, which was so nice to see that they were embracing the house movement. So
I'm so glad. Before this, you were talking about, forgetting things and making corrections. I can't believe I forgot Move This. So I'm glad you're here. You reminded me that, they did have another song that was pretty big here.
It wasn't anywhere as big. It wasn't anywhere as big. So I'm going to stay in the late 80s. And this person, she was, you talk about 2 people who were icons of the 80s. It was Madonna and this woman. And to me, I grabbed this one because I have a few of her 7-inches. But this one spawned a catchphrase that women said to men, probably still to this day. And that's Janet Jackson's "What Have You Done For Me Lately?" And it's like, really? I mean, but you cannot escape. Control was amazing, but I was blessed enough to see her on the Rhythm Nation tour. And you want to talk about someone who gave you everything in 2 hours. She left it all on that stage. And it was just one of those ones that, probably a top 20 concert for me, but Janet Jackson in the 80s and then into the 90s could never do wrong. And this one was one of my favorites. So.
Oh, this is too funny. So
let me guess. That's
your first video. You started with Michael Jackson. I ended with Michael Jackson. Now we're both ending with Janet. Oh man. So yeah, it just shows we're on the same wavelength.
We're right.
Yeah, Rhythm Nation. This one, when I knew we were going to do this is the one I had to pull because I got my first CD player gifted to me by my parents in 1989. And one of the first 3 CDs I ever purchased was this. So I had this single on CD, and that was one of the first singles I ever purchased on CD, and I had to get the 12-inch. So yeah, this is one of my favorite songs that she's done. In particular, because I know it so well, the 12-inch edit of this song, it is, it's different from the original mix, but I like it so much how they made the whole thing work. And so, if I had Desert Island singles, this would definitely be in my top 50 for sure. So
does it say on there who did the 12-inch?
It's actually a popular guy who did a fair amount of producing and remixing, Shep Pettibone.
That's who I thought it was.
Yeah.
By that point, I think he had done, he did so many for Madonna as well. And I remember, and I think we talked about this in our last video, if I was flipping through 12 inches and it was like, oh, okay, and I would sometimes just look at the back. If I saw a Shep Pettibone remix on there, I bought it. I know he did a remix for Faith by George Michael. He did a jazzy version, I think, of Faith. I think it's actually on the album. That is just fantastic. And I think it destroys the original one. And his remix of Express Yourself by Madonna is, to me, probably one of the best things he's ever done. So when you pulled that, I thought it was Shep Pettibone.
Yeah. What I like about Shep Pettibone is that he doesn't necessarily stick to the original instrumentation arrangements and just cut and dissect and extend parts of the song. He will bring in his own original instrumentation and make it work within the confines of the original song. And I want to say that 2 years ago, now that I remember it, they issued an album of his songs, his Sal Soul, the salsa Cuban disco label. So they did like a whole album of his remixes from the late 70s, early 80s. It's definitely worth seeking out. It's really good.
Yeah, I actually I think in my collection, I still have some of the old Sal Soul 12 inches. They were, especially in the 70s, there definitely was more of a disco feel, but some of them, they just have a great groove. And it is a label that if you're flipping and you're interested in, good remixes and a little bit of a Latin flair, for a buck or two, it's worthy of a punt to kind of take it home and go, you might score gold. I mean, because that one, more often than not, they had a good one.
Yep, exactly. This was fun.
This was a blast. What's funny is that I know we both talked about it, but we could have gone on. Because everyone's going to probably comment, and I'm sure they will comment below about, hey, you didn't show this. Well, let me tell you, kids, I've still got a stack, and I got a rejected stack of about like this that I didn't. But every era has it. Every era has that connection, I think, with their music. And I think that with the average age of viewers and members of don't get me wrong, I love the fact that we have so many young members in the VC buying and collecting. But I think even them are starting to get a little bit of the interest into the 80s genres.
Yeah.
And the complete overexposure we had to music at that time, because we didn't have Spotify, we didn't have, all these apps or instant gratification like YouTube. It was MTV, or you prayed to goodness that the radio would play that favorite song. I think we're lucky enough to have these artifacts, and we could have gone on for 12 hours with iconic songs. So
for me, I think if I extended myself to albums, I could definitely go on for hours. But
if albums and CDs came into play, I think we'd all be in trouble. But I would be interested, for anybody who's watching, give us one or two that you would add. We only showed 14 songs, and obviously we could have pulled more. When we talked, there was other things we could have pulled and we mentioned, but I'm curious to see, what did we not show that other people are saying, oh, it's essential, you got to have it. That to me is going to be interesting to see all the different takes.
Oh yeah. And it's like I said, you could easily just cover one particular year or all new wave. Yeah. It's the 80s were kind of a gold mine.
Yeah.
And you're right about, a lot of folks in the VC, being in their 40s or 50s. And so they should easily relate to this. But for the younger viewers, if you're not familiar with any of these songs, definitely check them out. When I walk around in stores and I'm seeing younger people, there's a tendency to go towards the classic rock stuff, but maybe it's just where I'm at. I don't see a whole lot of 80s t-shirts or anything like that. It's all bands from the 60s and the 70s, the Floyds, the Zeppelins, the Beatles, which is all great. But I mean, I don't think the 80s have really been given their due. I mean, show me a Duran Duran shirt.
Show you Duran Duran 12. That was single.
Yeah. You were prepared.
Yeah, I was. But no, you're absolutely right. And I've been into Target and I see MTV shirts, but these people who honestly were made because of MTV, but also conversely made MTV as big as they were. It was a kind of a give and take. They needed the video because the video catapulted sales for them. But if they didn't give them an incredible product in a video, it just didn't happen. Go back. You want to talk about videos of the day that still, I think, are some of the best that ever were done. Aha's Take on Me, Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel, You Might Think by the Cars, which was ultimately cheesy, and it looks horrible by today's standards of animation, but it's a great video.
Dire Straits. I mean, Money for Nothing. I mean, you watch it now and you're like, really?
Yeah, you just cringe. But you think about what the video meant to the 80s, and each one of these songs that we showed, they really had a strong video. It may have been a stage performance, but there was a budget from the record label to say, okay, well, the single's going to do this, so now we need to budget X amount for, the label, or from the label to do a video of some sort. So it was part of the process.
Yep. So Tim, maybe we do the 90s next sometime.
90s, aughts. What would we do now? I mean, you know what? We opened it up. What did we cover? What would you guys like to see? We'll take. This is here. Never happens to a DJ. We'll take requests.
Yes, we will.
I think this is it's a great way to kind of demystify what DJs did back then, but also have a great conversation of just how some one person can really control a lot of people through music, through a good time and stuff like that. And we kind of do that all with our videos. So what would you like to see? Maybe we'll do the 90s, and we can definitely have some fun with that. We could do it if we had to do a party now, but give us some ideas. We'll feed off of it and see what we can come up with. This one. Yep. This one, like I said, maybe we need to revisit the 80s. Maybe we need to do a second one.
Or we could swing it back a decade too.
Yeah, we could go back to the 70s. So, and 70s had some good numbers. So, don't be afraid to suggest that too. So these are always fun. I think that it's great to have a collab video where there's so much give and take, but I think it's also fun to be able to just kind of pull out these relics from years gone by and say, you know what, here's something you haven't thought about, but I'm sure someone's watching this going, man, I haven't heard that song in forever. And, now they're going to be all over YouTube again. So.
Well, Tim, thank you. And we'll see how people respond, and hopefully we'll do another one.
Thank you, Paul. It's always fun to be here, and it's great doing these. And thanks everybody for watching.
All right.